When it comes to the resale market, it's willing buyer, willing seller. We also have to bear in mind that we have to take care of all Singaporeans. For that, you have to ask my boss. No one person can make things happen on their own.
You have to end this debate. Which side is the best side? East side or west side?
Of course.
Welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. So today I have a new co-host with me on the show, Isabelle Liew. Now she's a Straits reporter who writes about housing issues, and she's fresh off covering the Committee of Supply debate for the Ministry of National Development, or MND. So I have to ask Belle, what was your biggest takeaway from COS this year?
So for me, it was the very highly anticipated first BTO project in Mount Pleasant that will be launched in October. You know, it is a very attractive location and it was announced some 4 years ago now, so I think many BTO hopefuls are excited to hear about its launch. But I am also glad to see more help for vulnerable groups such as seniors and families living in public rental flats.
So speaking of anticipation, I must introduce our guest for today, Minister for National Development Desmond Lee, who is also an MP for West Coast GRC. So thank you for coming on the show, Minister.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on because we have many questions to ask you today. So we want to cover a range of issues, you know, from housing affordability to what's it like navigating an election year while helming a ministry that deals with some of Singaporeans' biggest concerns. Yeah.
So since I mentioned it, let's talk about the upcoming BTO projects in the pipeline. There are more housing projects being built on brownfield sites, such as Mount Pleasant, which I mentioned, the Greater Southern Waterfront, and Bukit Timah Turf City. Mr. Lee, could you share more about how the government picks what sites to redevelop, given that Singapore is so small?
Well, the first thing is that housing is one of many needs, yeah? And the starting point is Singapore's city-state. City-state means everything that a country needs must fit within a city. And so our land pressures have always been and will always be very, very great, very tight. And so with that in mind, we also need to make sure that we plan not just for the immediate term, but also the long term. So long-term plan review, master plan review, ensures that we can cater land for all sorts of needs, not just housing, but also jobs, recreation, health, education, and so on. And within that frame, we need to have a sense of the kind of housing needs that Singaporeans will have both now, mid-term and long-term, and identify sites that can be put to housing use. And now some of these would be brownfield sites, as you mentioned, Mount Pleasant. Other places would be Bukit Timah, Turf City, and other sites.
Can I hop in here and ask,
Sure.
could you explain what brownfield sites is for our audience who may not know?
So brownfield sites would be sites that have an existing use, which you then reuse for another purpose like housing when, say, the lease of the existing user ends, or you phase them out and you make use of the site. Greenfield sites, on the other hand, would be sites that are, green, forested. And some of these are original greenfield sites. Some of these greenfield sites are actually brownfield sites because they were previously human settlement. They were cleared decades ago when government acquired the land. And you leave it fallow for a few decades until the land is needed. So in a way, it's a brownfield site that has turned green because you allow nature to take its course. And then in due course, when the land zone for, say, residential is needed for housing, then you recover that land and you put it to its use. So for example, Ulu Pandan Forest, Dover Forest, for instance, is one of those, which was former human settlement, recovered, became green, and then it's a brownfield, greenfield site, brown-green site, so to speak.
So actually in your COS speech, you highlighted a report card of sorts, right, of what MND's priorities are. One of the first of it was ensuring affordable and accessible housing. Now, one of the issues that's a concern for homeowners is the very hot HDB resale market, which has led to a rise of like $1 million flats. I mean, the government or MND has said very small amount for now, but many Singaporeans have voiced that, they feel like it's still challenging to own a home, even with cooling measures and more grants. So what do you say to ground sentiment that homeownership is slipping out of the reach of maybe younger Singaporeans?
Well, I think it's first important to know that the main source of affordable housing would be BTO flats. And over the last 5 years, 2021 to 2025, we will exceed our commitment to launch 100,000 flats. So that's lots of supply. And BTO, we price it not to recover development costs, but we price the flats to ensure affordability for Singaporeans of different income levels. So flats in different locations, different sizes to cater to Singaporeans of different household incomes. And so want to assure Singaporeans that BTO flats will continue to be available. We put in a lot of supply. We have 50,000 flats from 2025 to 2027. So continued supply of affordable BTO flats. Now, when it comes to the resale market, it's willing buyer, willing seller. People have finished their MOP. They want to move home. They sell on the open market. People buy at the price which they feel is something that they're prepared to pay. And so in a way, a resale market is different from BTO. BTO, we set the prices, we impose the discounts, we give the grants, and we ensure it's affordable and priced for Singaporeans of different incomes. On the resale market, our main levers are through supply and demand. In an open market, you inject more supply to moderate the prices by meeting demand. And you may sometimes have to impose cooling measures that are demand side. You crimp demand, for example, loan to valuation restrictions. And so the resale side has been high ever since COVID struck because of a supply-demand imbalance. And so we've been doing a few things. One is to put in cooling measures, the most recent being late last year, LTV measures. Supply is coming on stream in large numbers, but it's important to understand why we're in this situation, because COVID caused significant delays. It caused people to be anxious about housing. It caused resale prices to spike because there's more demand than there is supply. But at the same time, if you consider 5 years ago and 5 years later, which is 2025, the number of flats that are completing their minimum occupation period. Now, let's just wind back the clock. If there was no COVID, the number of flats that HDB would have completed in 2020, that was the ground zero for COVID, right? 2020. If there was no COVID, HDB would have completed 20,000 flats. And 20,000 flats then, 5 years later, 20,000 flats today, completing the MOP, some of which would enter the supply for the resale market. But that wasn't the case, because with COVID, instead of completing 20,000, HDB completed less than half of that because of delays. And so you fast forward 5 years to today, you'll see that the number of flats completing their minimum occupation period, or MOP, is 8,000. But that number will increase next year to 13,500, and by 2028, 19,500. So you see the supply going up significantly, and you couple that with two things. One is the significant injection of BTO supply from 2021 to 2025, which is 100,000 flats, which will eventually find its way into, some of it will find its way into the market, as well as the cooling measures that were introduced as late as last year, right? Late last year. These will stabilize the resale market. So we've completed all the pandemic-delayed flats, some 75,800 flats. We have brought median waiting times for new flats down to pre-COVID levels. We have increased the supply of shorter waiting time flats, 2,800 last year, 3,800 this year, which comprises some 20% of our yearly BTO supply this year. And we've got the first-timer application rates for BTO flats down to lower than pre-COVID levels. So in February 2025, BTO exercise, first-timer application rates was about 1.5, which is lower than pre-COVID. And with that, with the demand from first-timers being addressed to some extent, we have space to look at other groups. So from July this year, July 2025 BTO launch, we will be restoring some of the access that second-timers previously had. And so we will increase the allocation for second-timers, including those who are looking for a bigger home because their family has grown, or who need to move to another part of Singapore and have a financial budget to look at. It will be increased by 5 percentage points for those buying 3-room and larger BTO flats for second-timers.
So can I put in my point of view as a new homeowner? Because you know, every other day I get an advertisement from a property agent saying, "Oh, I sold a flat in your area for like $1 million, or like 4-room flats are like 900K."
Yes, $1 million.
Yeah, I also get
That's
a
my
bit
area,
shocked
actually.
because yeah, and I'm not even in like a central area, I would say. So, I mean, if I look at selling in a couple of years, then I know you're saying that supply will actually like taper out like demand and prices and things like that, right? Yeah. But if I'm a homeowner, I also I want those prices to, I'm not trying to profiteer off of it, but it's like oh, should I be selling my flat at that price? I mean, what do you make of the current prices?
Well, property cycles are as they are. Property market moves in cycles. There's an up cycle and a down cycle. And in a situation like today where you have supply-demand imbalance, which is gradually being met by very significant supply, and of course the MOP supply being disrupted, going to be restored in years to come, one should expect stability in the market, coupled with the cooling measures. So you're right. The resale market is a function of supply and demand, but it is also a function of the sentiment in the market. When you see some transactions of more attractively sited flats going for higher prices, on the seller side, they feel that, well, I should also be able to sell at those prices. So expectation goes up from the seller point of view. And also buyers, may fear missing out, FOMO, right? And they worry that if I don't lock in at this high price tomorrow, someone tells me it may go up. And so it has a, kind of interlocking effect. And so I said before that in as much as we address supply demand, we also want to make sure that consumers, home buyers, even home sellers, and our property real estate professionals have all the information and share that information with their customers, so that they have a sense of what prices they should be transacting at, and to be realistic and prudent about the prices that they buy at and sell at.
I know you said that this is like a demand supply market thing, right? But
Yes.
is HDB going to step in at some point when it becomes, when I think now $1 million flats are about like 4%. Is there like a threshold for when the government will come and say, okay, no, we will also regulate the resale market?
Yeah. So we have not been averse to putting in cooling measures, which are measures that crimp demand. So when people want to buy, you impose restrictions that make it a bit more difficult. For example, tighten valuation, reduce loan, set a ceiling for interest rates, or a floor, interest rate floor, for instance. All these cause the market to recalibrate when demand side is crimped. Now, those are painful measures because they effectively require the measures to crimp demand and make it more difficult for some groups or significant groups to buy. And therefore, the market needs to find a new baseline. The other approach is to, one, increase grants to make it affordable for certain target groups like first-timers. And number two, to inject more supply, just make more housing units available, because we have a pipeline and stream of housing to put out for people. And so you have to find a balance between both sets of measures, because as I said, you want the market that moves in cycles to remain within what they call economic fundamentals. They don't run ahead of GDP growth or the economy. You want them to run ahead of income growth over the long term. So we do keep an eye on these parameters, and if measures are called for, we will not hesitate to implement them.
Mr. Lee, so you mentioned this psychological factor, which you've spoken about on several occasions. So you will know that buying and selling a home is very emotional. So, the buyers may be very anxious to secure a home, and they may not necessarily be thinking of all of these measures. So despite that, what advice would you give to younger home buyers who are anxious?
Yeah. So for young couples, especially those buying their first home, we have a strong pipeline of BTO flats coming out. In fact, from 2021-2025, 100,000. If you look further until 2027, we have planned for 130,000 BTO flats. That is excluding the balance flats that we are rolling out. And in fact, in February this year, we rolled out the largest ever sale of balance flat exercise, 5,500 flats in different parts of Singapore. And both BTO flats and balance flats don't just come with market discounts, but they also come with means-tested grants to make things affordable. So for young couples, look to that supply. Balance flats a bit more proximate to the resale market because they're either completed or near completion. So for those who need flats more urgently, you can look to that. And later this year, we will have another good sale of balance flat exercise for Singaporeans who are looking for housing. But in addition to that, we also have what is called shorter waiting time flats. And these are flats with a waiting time of typically 2+ years. Yeah? And we do that when demand stabilizes, we are then able to build ahead of demand. And so last year in 2024, we rolled out 2,800 of such flats. And this year, 3,800, which is about 20% or 1 in 5 of the BTO stock coming out this year will have waiting times of 2+ years. So all these will address the concerns of young couples in terms of affordability as well as accessibility.
Do you have any personal advice?
I'm sure couples will look at, firstly, they look at the budget, their loan, their grant. They will look at the locations which appeal to them. For example, nearer to parents, nearer to family, nearer to workplace sometimes, or other caregiving arrangements. And then they will identify that location and say, well, HDB has told me what's going to be offered this round, next round, and maybe projected further on. We have a sense of what I should be looking out for. And then decide, you have a BTO flat, in a particular location with a waiting time of now 3 to 4 years. It's our median waiting time, restored to pre-COVID levels. Or do I want to try a balanced flat where competition is stiffer, but I think I want to go for something with shorter waiting times or that's more immediate? So a range of options for young couples.
So it was announced during MND's budget debate that there will be more support for families living in rental flats to buy their own homes with more grants under the Fresh Start housing scheme. Mr. Lee, what impact do you think measures like these have on social mobility?
It's very important that so we don't look at housing in isolation when it comes to families lower income and who live in rental housing. For those families, moving from rental housing to home ownership is one important indicator for them of social mobility, that they are then able to get into sold housing, home ownership, or get back into home ownership. But I think you have to see it holistically. You see it holistically. So we support rental families through Fresh Start Housing Grant, through a major flagship initiative known as Comlink Plus, where we support rental flat families with young children because we want them to not just be stable and be self-reliant, but also have social mobility and housing support through Fresh Start, as well as through the home ownership support team, contributes to the holistic support that we provide to these families to have a better life. So increasing the grant for second timers from 50 to 75,000, extending the shorter lease flats under Fresh Start to first timers who have not been able to get into home ownership at the get-go but go into rental housing. These are some of the ways that MND contributes to the overall whole of government support, in fact the whole of society support through Comlink to better support our rental families and ensure that we don't have families with young children perpetuating generation after generation in rental housing.
Okay, so Mr. Lee, since we have you on the usual place, I must ask you about what everyone's talking about. That's the upcoming GE or general elections. Every election feels like a report card for the incumbent representatives. So looking back over the past 5 years, how would you say your West Coast GRC team has fared, especially after Mr. Iswaran's departure due to corruption charges?
Well, Natasha, it's been a challenging 5 years. 5 years ago in 2020, we were in the midst of COVID. We had an emergency to deal with, but we also had the GE to fight for in order to win the mandate of Singaporeans. And in West Coast, it was a tough fight. It was a hot seat. It was a tough fight. Over the last 5 years, given the mandate of the residents, we continued to serve them, put in place schemes to support them in the here and now. For example, people are concerned about cost of living. So apart from relying on national support schemes like the CDC vouchers and other forms of support for cost of living, on the ground, you also have to contribute your local schemes in your different districts to support families, particularly those lower middle income households. So we have various initiatives in place. We also make sure that the estate upgrading continues apace so that people feel that their homes continue to be refreshed and their estates and neighborhoods continue to be revitalized. And of course, with plans for different parts of West Coast being rolled out through the draft master plan, it gives people a sense that things are improving in their living environment. But also localized support schemes. Some of us focus on families and caregivers with special needs. We have a project Refresh to help homeowners who are struggling with hoarding and need decluttering support. We have rolled out the 1 million trees movement locally as well through Nature Kakis, and many others. So it's not just implementing national schemes like Age Well and Healthier SG on the ground, though that's important because we need to partner our government agencies to implement them well in our localities, but also rolling out measures and initiatives with the support of our partners and stakeholders and the community to support the different groups, particularly the more vulnerable in our community. And at the same time, continuing to look after the estates, looking after the neighborhood. So working through COVID, and in the last few years after COVID, we've put in place a number of measures, we've rolled out initiatives, we've partnered the community, but I'd say there's a lot more that we need to do in the years ahead, given the national as well as the global challenges that we'll face. And the local support is an important component in our social compact, not just government and the community, but also local grassroots, local MPs, each pulling their weight, putting in place measures and schemes at the local level to supplement what is available at the national level.
How did it change for your team after you were one man down, basically, after Mr. Iswaran had to leave, right? What was the dynamics between the team?
Well, we stepped up. We made sure that West Coast was well supported. I looked after both districts, both Boon Lay, which is my district I came in GE2020 representing, and now also looking after West Coast. And it's an important team effort, right? Whether it's in the grassroots, whether it's MP's duties, whether it's in the ministry, you really need to work with a good team. Work with a good team to be able to make sure that people are taken care of, make sure that programs are properly implemented, make sure that the policies continue to be refreshed, make sure that the local schemes continue to be well supported. And some of these on a local level need to tend to the relationships to make sure that the partners continue to feel invested, that they feel supported, and the residents feel that the programs continue to be updated.
So going into the coming general elections, do you think you're ready to be an anchor minister?
And I think for that, you have to ask my boss.
Okay, no matter
Prime
which
Minister.
GRC you're in, do you think you're ready to be an anchor minister?
Well, effectively for the last 2 years, year plus two, I've had to step up to that responsibility to make sure that not just my own district, but the districts that make up West Coast are looked after. Whether I'm ready or not ultimately depends on the boss, but I stand ready to serve when called upon.
Analysts are expecting to see tough fights in many constituencies, especially now West Coast is now West Coast Jurong, or will be West Coast Jurong GRC. At the last election, the PAP narrowly won West Coast GRC with a 51.68% of the vote against a PSP team.
Yeah.
So what do you make of the talk that it will be a tough fight, and what do you make of your opponents who will stand in the area, whoever they are?
Yeah. So we had, it was a hot contest in 2020, and I've no reason to doubt that it will continue to be so. In part because of all the challenges that we face nationally, of all the challenges we face internationally as well. And of course, we've stepped up, and we want to make sure that we continue to serve the residents to the best of our ability. So there will be hot contests, I presume, in many parts of Singapore, including in West Coast, but we stand ready to serve the residents if given the mandate.
So how do you feel voters will respond to you, given that housing affordability is a major concern and it's also part of your portfolio?
Yes. Well, housing has been and will always be top of mind for Singaporeans. I can't imagine, I don't remember any GE where housing is not talked about, not hot, not an issue, not a concern. But I think you look at where we started off at the start of the term and where we are today in terms of the housing situation, public housing in particular. In 2020, we started off with severe shortages, with significant disruptions, with spiking resale prices, with spiking demand. We have brought down BTO application rates for first-timers to below pre-COVID levels. Waiting times, we brought it down to before pre-COVID levels. Shorter waiting time flats, we've ramped them up significantly. Housing affordability through BTO flats, through balance flats, through grants increases, we've restored it. We have also introduced new initiatives like first-time parents and married couples to help first-timers who are buying their very first flat to get their flat more readily. And of course, the resale market, as I've said, through both cooling measures as well as significant supply, all right, the market will stabilize. So I would say that housing isn't, we haven't addressed everything, but we've addressed many issues that are of more pressing concern to Singaporeans. And at the same time, taken these 5 years, not just to tackle the immediate issues, but to look at the medium to long term in terms of affordability, in terms of being able to build flats that are affordable in more prime or premium parts of Singapore. So we have the prime plus and standard classification model that allows us to continue to build flats in more attractive locations, affordably, and yet ensure that over time, those areas remain affordable to Singaporeans of different income levels in order to ensure that Singapore remains egalitarian and have a good social mix in different parts of Singapore, and ensure that our subsidy scheme remains fair in terms of allocation between those who are buying in more premium locations versus who are buying in more standard locations. So I would say that these 5 years, completing all the COVID-delayed flats, ramping up supply, shortening waiting times, increasing the shorter waiting time flats, introducing new priority schemes, and then also planning and implementing housing policies that will see us well into the future are things that we have done. But I'd say more work needs to be done, including planning for the draft master plan, planning for to meet the needs and aspirations of Singaporeans across the island in the mid to long term.
So how do you think voters will react to? So you're telling us about supply, being ramped up. You mentioned data and indicators that have helped the supply pipeline. Now, do you think voters, understand that all the numbers and stuff? Given that $1 million flat transactions continue to contribute to the view that housing is getting unaffordable.
So the key is that the resale market headlines of certain proportion of resale market has captured the imagination of Singaporeans. Bound to be so. When you have certain headlines, they cause people to have a sense of where the market is. But we continue to assure Singaporeans through ample BTO supply, as well as significant injection to stabilize the resale market, that housing will remain affordable for Singaporeans. So with all those talk about $1 million flats, yes, there are some flats that because of their location, because of their relative newness after MOP, you have MOP flats in better locations like Strathmore, Dawson and so on, high floor. So those have captured the imagination, but you look at the hard data, actual transaction data, actual CPF usage and cash outlay for both BTO and resale, 8 in 10 last year, collecting their actual keys, were able to service their HDB monthly mortgage entirely from CPF with very little or no cash outlay. So I think that is an indicator of how people have been able to find both BTO and resale flats that are affordable to them. BTO because we've priced it as such, resale because although there are high-priced resale flats, people have found homes that suit their needs and their budgets. But for us, the assurance that with both cooling measures and significant supply, as I've said, should stabilize the market. We also have to bear in mind that we have to take care of all Singaporeans. So on the one hand, you have home buyers who feel a sense of assurance that their homes have generated value. And on the other hand, there are also Singaporeans who are looking to buy, who want to be assured that housing remains affordable. And so on the one hand, asset appreciation, giving assurance to people who maybe prior to COVID had to deal with negative equity, had to deal with a soft resale market. On the other hand, both parents as well as children looking to buy homes, concerned about resale affordability. So we balance the two by injecting BTO, which we price affordably, and through the measures I mentioned on the resale market to provide stability.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask about those sandwiched in between, right? Because Belle, you were telling me about, some people who are cash rich.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
so on that note, we are also hearing that there are many middle class Singaporeans feeling squeezed. They are not rich enough to buy private property, but they have also hit the income ceiling, or they are not cash rich enough to buy an executive condo. So is the government doing anything to address this sandwich group?
I would say that's me. I'm priced out. in
So some
between.
of these families you're saying would already have their homes, so they're looking to upgrade. Am I right?
Or they are also first time buyers?
First time buyers. Well, so for first time buyers, we do have grants to help them with their home ownership aspirations. And then for those who exceed the income ceiling, say for BTO, we have the EC option. Now you look at it at $14,000 income ceiling for BTO today. That caters to some 8 in 10 Singaporeans. So we are catering to the significant majority of Singaporeans. So there will continue to be a range of housing options. We are increasing the supply of EC units this year. So in the first half of the year, we have already injected more EC supply than last year. And we have the second half of this year to go, right? In terms of EC injection. In terms of government land sales, to provide more private housing options for Singaporeans who may look to private housing. In recent years, we've had the largest launch ever in the last 10 to 13 years, injecting a lot more supply. And we will continue to amp up supply on private housing as well. So not just the HDB side, the private housing side as well, to ensure stability, to ensure choice. And we're launching in different parts of Singapore, including the outside central region area, rest of Singapore, to give people a whole range of options.
I must say, just to relay some concerns from first-time home buyers who may have hit the income ceiling for BTO flats and they want to get an executive condo. So I believe that with the income ceiling, they only qualify for about $1 million in loans. But the prices of executive condos have increased over the years, and the starting prices are around, say, 1.6, 1.7 million, which requires a lot of cash. So what would you say to these first-time home buyers?
Yeah, so we will continue to inject supply. And when there's more supply to meet demand, prices should moderate. We want to make sure that our schemes continuously get reviewed to see how they can ensure both affordability and accessibility for Singaporeans. Now, on the public housing side, I'd say there are a lot more levers through BTO, for instance, through grants on the resale market side of the house. Through EC, there are some levers to ensure that they are priced to affordability, although it's within the developer's control and not within the government's control. But there are conditions in place. All policies, whether EC policy, BTO policy, continue to be reviewed. But one important lever is to continue to inject supply, right, to ensure stability, to ensure that pricing power is more balanced between the developer and the prospective home buyer. So there are a variety of measures that are available, some direct, some less direct, to ensure that different groups of Singaporeans are able to find a home that's within their need and within their budget.
Right. So you've been in politics for a long time, I would
2011.
say. Yeah, a long time. Sounds like the last 5 years have been the most intense. Would you agree?
Possibly so, yes.
And I wanted to ask you, because you helm a ministry that deals with like hot button issues, and then you had to step up in West Coast GRC. What is something you've learned about yourself in the last couple of years?
Well, multitasking.
Did you get better at it?
I think you get better over the years. Yeah, I think all of us get better over the years, but also being able to work with diverse teams to be able to achieve the mission that you set out to achieve. Having a collective goal with your teammates, whether it's on the HDB or MND side, whether it's on the MSF side, whether it's on the Boon Lay West Coast side, being able to work with a team, whether they're colleagues, whether they're volunteers, whether they're stakeholders representing different organizations. No one person can make things happen on their own. And with more responsibilities in different departments. One thing I've learned is that working as a team is so critical to ensuring that you come up with good ideas, that you engage widely, and that you can implement policies on the ground that are sensible, that are fair, and that are well received by the public.
So is it true that your Meet the People sessions can go up till past midnight?
Well, I think in many parts of Singapore, MPS sessions can be quite late. But in different parts, different districts, the needs are different. And so, for example, in Boon Lay and West Coast, Boon Lay in particular, the numbers can be quite high. And that's because there are families who may need more support.
So you just keep going all the way up to like past midnight. What's your latest time you've gone?
Quite late. I think you asked my volunteers, I don't keep track. But it can be quite late, yeah. People have come, they queue up, they have genuine issues to face. They have difficulties, some very urgent and pressing. Some of them are facing very serious problems. Some financial, some family, some health, and some perfect storm of everything coming together. And they come, they look for you, they want to meet you, they want to talk you through the challenges to see how they can get better support from government, from the local community. Some of them, they just want the chance to share the difficulties and see what possible solutions there might be, what possible help can they get, what advice they can get to solve their problems. And as long as they want to speak to you, I'll do my best to be there to listen to them. And as I said, there's a team of people. I have volunteers who, some are legally trained. I've got some volunteer doctors. There are some who are social work trained. There are individuals who have become quite good in working with our job matching agencies. So they kind of focus in my area on supporting my residents who are looking for employment or re-employment. And so, as I said earlier, it's a team effort. You have to represent the constituency. They come, they speak to us, they speak to me. If they want to speak to me, I'll be there for them. And work with the whole team, referring them to the relevant agencies, to the social services, healthcare agencies, medical social workers, to the job support agencies, and have a team who know a little bit more about each of these various domains to be able to provide that more integrated support for the individual or family.
So I think most people will recognize you as one of the MPs for like West Coast GRC, right?
Yeah.
So let's put that aside for now. You have to end this debate. Which side is the best side? East side or west side?
Of course.
Why? Okay, I'm neutral because I'm on neither side, but yeah.
Well, I would say that Singapore is a very small island, and yet in different parts of Singapore, there is character, So when I was pursuing my wife, right, she was my girlfriend then, I would go to the East all the time. I would drive there, And so the East became very familiar to me. I know the streets, I know where the food is and all. But since 2011, serving in the West, you go there every week, many times a week. You drive to different parts of Singapore, you meet the residents, they tell you where the good food is, and then you find charming areas, and then you work to improve them. For example, Jurong Lake Gardens, right? Over the last, 10 over years, with the support of NParks in the community, it has become a national garden. And if you look at the before and after photos, very different. Very different. I would say the old park had its charm, but the new one has got character, it's got some elements of history retained. And so in the West, there are many areas which people will recognize as home. Yeah.
So before we let you go, is there anything that, based on what we talked about today, was there anything you wanted to add on or that we didn't get to ask you?
Well, you mentioned earlier about Mount Pleasant, yeah? Isabelle, and I thought to just share a few stories about Mount Pleasant. Maybe many of us characterize it as a BTO project in a good location, well connected, maybe plus, maybe prime. But actually, if you look at it, you talk about making use of different parts of Singapore, rejuvenating Singapore, putting in housing. There's a deeper texture to all of that, because when the new flats come up in Mount Pleasant from October onwards, it's not just a brownfield site, It's a place with lots of memories and lots of history. It's an old police academy, and I remember when I visited the site with then Minister Wan. I was a Minister of State in MND, and we were looking at the potential for police academy, right? Or soon to be old police academy when they moved out. And we were going around the estate, going around the old police academy, looking at the parade square, the heritage buildings, and planning for it into the future. So this was before 2015 we visited, and it's 2025 we're launching. So it's a certain runway to get to the starting line. And then when I was in Home Affairs and MND, there were retired officers, there were national servicemen who asked about the housing plans for Mount Pleasant. This was some 8-9 years ago, and I said, yeah, we're going to develop. Many of them have very strong emotions because memories, they served there, they trained there, and they asked, can we have a farewell? And we arranged a farewell to old PA, and 5,000 came. 5,000, they came, different ranges of emotion, including some who were very sad that part of their life memories would make way for new housing. But we put in the effort. We then worked with the heritage professionals in the ministry to decide which buildings to conserve, the Parade Square, the buildings, and we engaged the officers extensively. And we want to make sure that even as we continue to build new housing, that we respect the layers of memories and the people who tap on those memories to form part of their sense of being, their sense of identity as a Singaporean, their I wouldn't just say childhood memories, but their early years memories, right, as they were growing up, and ensure that while Singapore's karma is that we have to keep redeveloping and improving and re-engineering and revitalizing our city, that we continue to protect biodiversity, protect heritage, and find the right balance. So OPA, Mount Pleasant, will be one of a number of sites, brownfield, but with a deep sense of memory, history, and heritage that will then guide my HDB and URA planners to be sensitive to those layers beneath. So you'll see new housing there. It'll be beautiful housing. It'll be affordable because it'll be prime or plus, and yet carry layers of heritage, so that people who used to train there, coming back to this new estate, will find something that can resonate with them. So OPA is one. There are many other sites, but this signals a different approach that MND is taking to rejuvenation and to redevelopment.
Minister, thank you very much for sharing that and for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much.
That's it from The Usual Place. Now, as we edge closer to the 2025 general election, you can expect hot takes and these one-on-one conversations with MPs or ministers on The Usual Place. So if you don't want to miss out, like, subscribe, or hit the notification bell on YouTube to get fresh content. Now, you can also catch The Usual Place on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on the ST app. I'll see you next time.